Welcome to Daily Armor. Today we're going to be in the book of Titus. The book of Titus, we're going to be in chapter 3, looking at verses 1 through 5. Really want to focus on verse number 3. I think that one out of the 5 verses was my favorite one because it was the one that did the most good on the inside. And let's get into it and I'll explain a little bit more. So Titus chapter 3, looking at verses 1 through 5, and it says, "Put them in mind to be subject to principalities and powers, to obey magistrates, to be ready to every good work, to speak evil of no man, to be no brawlers, but gentle, showing all meekness unto all men. For we ourselves also were sometimes foolish, disobedient, deceived, serving divers lusts and pleasures, living in malice and envy, hateful and hating one another. But after that the kindness and love of God our Savior toward man appeared, not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercy he saved us by the washing of regeneration and renewing of the Holy Ghost." I was thinking about that love of God, still kind of on that love of God question, experience. How do we experience the love of God? How do we show the love of God? And because we've been shown the love of God from Him, we've been given such a beautiful gift, then He requires us to show that kind of love and kindness toward others. And this is a good reminder of when you have that envy, strife, maybe that you are frustrated with somebody, maybe that you are harboring unforgiveness towards someone. They may not have even done anything to you personally. Maybe that they have done it to themselves. Maybe that they have, it's been to a friend, a family member. You're frustrated and you want to be bitter. These verses here are reminding me when I'm feeling that way, it gives me a very quick attitude adjustment. Here in verse number 1, "Put them in mind to be subject to principalities and powers, to obey magistrates, to be ready to every good work, to speak evil of no man, to be no brawlers, but gentle." Gentle. When you're not wanting to be very gentle, when you're wanting to be harsh, when I'm wanting to be harsh, and it can well up inside, and then we don't want it to come out. I was telling Todd, I think it was yesterday or the day before, I can't remember which now, how does he deal with things whenever he he is, you want to show the love of God towards somebody, and he works around a lot of situations, but then he is exposed to a lot of things at the same time. You're witnessing things, you're observing things, and yet you have to separate that and not respond the same way. You have to respond with the love of God and with that kindness, and not holding grudges and not letting it affect you. I remember one time from the pulpit, our pastor back home, he's no longer with us. He's with the Lord now. Him and his wife both are with the Lord now. But years ago, I remember him talking about not using him like like as if he was some kind of priest that we needed to make confession to. He said, "I'm a man." He said, "I'm in the flesh." And he said, it changes things when you are exposing things. Now, if somebody needs counsel, that was different, but just to really, get that off your chest, and you're saying all these things to someone, whether it's your pastor, whether it's your best friend, whether it's whoever it might be, to share all these things. Sometimes it's a bigger burden than they're prepared for, and God can handle that. But I can't handle it, and you can't handle it. It changes something. It's very difficult for us to separate those things. When we do find out something on somebody, or we do have a bad experience with somebody, or we do, whatever the circumstance is, something has happened to, a loved one or whatever, and it's the kind of the fault of someone else, and you want to be so frustrated with that person. This is a set of verses that has helped me get a little attitude adjustment and keep things in perspective. Verse number 3 reminds me, for we ourselves. Remember when you're pointing your finger at somebody, I can't believe they did that. What in the world were they thinking? We have to remind ourselves, hey, what about when it was us? For we ourselves also were sometimes what? There's a list of things. And I've been guilty of every one of these things. Foolish. I've been foolish. Have you been foolish? I've been stupid. I've just been right stupid. I've done something and then 10 minutes later realize, what in the world were you thinking? Why did you do that? Why did you say that? Why did you, what in the world even possessed you to think that, much less let it come out your mouth? And so I have been foolish many, many times, and I've not arrived, so I know I'm going to be foolish in days to come. I'm going to say something wrong. I'm going to say something, maybe even not even saying that it was wrong, but it was with the wrong attitude. It come out snappy. And so many times I'm like, oh, I didn't mean for that to come out snappy. But it did. And, so there was that little, we get that pent up anxiety sometimes comes to the surface, and it comes to the surface out our mouth. And it's happened to me many times. And I try my best to keep it in check, to keep things in line, but I'm going to mess up. You're going to mess up. And this is a reminder. For we ourselves also were sometimes foolish. And not only were we sometimes foolish, it's going to happen again. And what else? Disobedient. Have you ever, the Lord wanted you to do something and you were like, okay, Lord, but not right now. I don't have time. Or, Lord, I'm too scared to do that. Or I'm too afraid to do I'm too afraid. I don't feel like I deserve to do that. I'm not qualified to do that. We give a list of excuses. Moses gave excuses why that he shouldn't be the one to go down and deal, talk to Pharaoh to lead the people out. And yet this is what God told him to do. And so he was end up being obedient in that, but he didn't want to at first. And he gave a list of excuses. It makes me think of Jonah, and he absolutely was walking away, running away, going in the opposite direction of where the Lord wanted him to be. And so we've all had those times, those moments, even if it was in that split second. Like sometimes I've missed opportunities, and I had like just that quick, and I didn't follow through, or something's coming out that the Lord's saying, zip it, bite your tongue, zip it up, and I let her fly anyway. And that was being disobedient, and I've had to ask for forgiveness. And I will say that I'm not as bad as I used to be, but I'm nowhere near what I need to be. So as we ourselves were sometimes foolish, sometimes we've been disobedient. What else does it say? Deceived. Have you ever been deceived? Have you ever you've messed up? You had confidence in something or someone, or, well, this is what I need to do. And then you figure out, oh my word, that was the wrong decision. That was the wrong plan. That was the wrong, thought pattern, whatever the case may be. Have you been deceived? I have. I've been deceived. Serving divers lust. Have you ever been guilty of, it's all about me. Lord, this is what I want to do, and I want to do it so bad, Lord, that, I will do it at any cost. I will pay any price. And to figure out that the price was way more than what you really, really wanted to pay. It's changed kind of how I pray about things. There are some things that I want. And I am asking the Lord not to let me have them, but I'm praying for His will to be done. And if the answer is no, then I want to rest in that, and that no means that there's something better than what I thought, or there was a danger that I would not be aware of. And I don't want what I want at any cost. I don't want that any longer. I have had times where I've wanted that, that at any cost. But Lord, I want this. I want this so bad. That's all I think about. That's serving divers lusts. That is serving self. That is serving what we want. And I've been guilty of that. And we'll probably get caught up, even if it's, even if it's just in a day or a moment or whatever, we'll get caught up in that in days to come. I'll have to crucify the flesh. We have to fast. We have to let the flesh go without some things sometimes, because the more it gets, the more it wants. I'm doing that with food, and the more it gets, the more it wants. Somebody asked me the other day, says, if you eat early in the morning, are you hungry all day? Yes, I am. I don't eat. It used to drive my dad crazy. He's no longer with us, but it used to drive my dad crazy. Teresa, you've got to eat breakfast. Eddie, I don't want to eat breakfast. I can eat breakfast. I can eat about any time of the day or night. But I don't want to eat breakfast, because if I eat early in the morning, I'm going to just want to eat. It's just, I'm going to be hungry a few hours later. And then after that, I'm going to be hungry a few hours after that. And I will just continue to graze all day long. And so, I do some intermittent fasting where I wait till normally I don't even get hungry until about 10 o'clock. But if I can push it to 11, 12, 1 o'clock and go for as long as I can before I eat that first meal, and sometimes, some days I'm not eating a thing until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, then that's helping to make the flesh wait for it. It's okay. It's actually healthy. It's actually very healthy. But do we get caught up sometimes in those divers lusts? Yes, of course. Yes, of course. It happens. We have, and we will again. Serving divers lusts and pleasures. I love to travel. I love to get out and do things. And we are also, we've not just trying to get our health in line around this home, but we're also, for the past several years, a couple of years now, we are really trying to keep our finances in check. Not that we're doing it perfectly, not that we don't mess up, not that things don't come up that are outside of our control, and they certainly have. And I will say to that, God is faithful. But we are trying our best to not just think about all the pleasures that there are out there and that we want to be a part of every one of them, but to bathe it in prayer and ask, Lord, what will you allow? And what will the budget allow? And plan for things, and not just give in to every pleasure that is out there, because what's going to happen is that when we do that, we can take it too far. It can take us further than we wanted to go. So we all have been guilty of that at some point in our life. We have been guilty of that, and it doesn't have to be with something illegal or something outside of the commandments of the Lord, but within those inner desires of even wanting to do more and to be more and to serve more, but without sitting and talking to the Lord even more, So we have to be careful, because we all can get caught up in that. Living in malice and envy. Really being angry with somebody, living in bitterness towards somebody, being like, if you hear their name, it just makes you cringe. If you see them walk in a room, you're just like, oh, it puts you in a bad mood immediately. We have all been guilty of that person that really rubs us the wrong way, that always seems to have something smart aleck to say, that always seems to have that you never can do anything right, and they do everything perfect. And if you're not doing it the way they do it, then then you're not doing it right. It comes down to, what, if I'm a follower of the Lord, then I need to worry about what He thinks and not what somebody else thinks. And what that does is it takes their power away, their effect on you away. But it's easy to get caught up in that malice and that envy. It seems like that they're getting their way about everything. That's something that I had to deal with. My husband is like great at everything. Seems like he can, can do no wrong about a lot of things. And that really got on my nerves for a long time. I'm just being honest. It got on my nerves for a long time. And it really wasn't that way, but that was my perception. He didn't actually feel that way. That was my perception. It was my problem. I was the one with the problem, not him. And so the Lord had to deal with me about that root of bitterness that I was having issues with, that things that he, would do, and I wouldn't see the struggles. I wouldn't see the things that gave him trouble. I wouldn't see the hard side of it. And maybe that somebody looks at my life and all they see is, the good side of it, and they don't see the struggles that I go through, and maybe they don't see the struggles that you go through, and maybe that there's some bitterness that we see in one another. Maybe there's some bitterness that we have toward one another, and God's saying, you've been guilty of that. Don't be so quick to point fingers at somebody else who's being guilty of that when you yourself, sometimes it's been me, sometimes it's been you, when we ourselves have been prone for that. And even going a step further, living in malice and envy, and then hateful and hating one another. Hateful. That's when you can't help but to be hateful towards somebody else, to not want to do anything nice for them. I don't want to give my time toward that person. I don't want to help them. They got themselves in it. Let them get themselves out of it. When we have that hateful attitude towards somebody, the Lord is reminding us with these verses that we ourselves have been guilty, and we ourselves wanted somebody to forgive us, to show compassion. That's really what it's about, is that we've been forgiven of all these things by God, the ultimate, holy, righteous, perfect God. He is our creator. He is our judge, and he is a righteous judge. He's not an unrighteous judge like everybody else. Like we ourselves, when we want to be judgmental, we're not a righteous judge. God has every right to judge us. He made us. He made everything around us. He made things for us. He made us for him. He made us for him. He is the potter, and we're this lump of clay that he decides to do something with, that he takes the time to take his hands and mold us and shape us and make us and give us purpose. He's got a plan for us. He's like, oh, I'm going to make this because this is what I need over here, and this I need over there, and it's all going to work together. And he's got the master plan. And so these verses are reminding us of what we have experienced, what we've been guilty of. I've been guilty of all these things at some point in my life. You have been guilty probably of all of these things at some point, sometime in your life. You've been guilty of these things. Living in malice and envy, hateful, and hating one another. When we start feeling that way towards somebody, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's a stranger. I don't care if it's somebody that's in power, that's in the political realm. We don't need to be hated. We don't need to be hated. We don't need to hate them. But we've all been guilty of having that hatred within us. It can come up so quickly. Now, maybe it doesn't stay, and Lord willing, it doesn't stay. But even when it wells up in just that moment, and then, you read a verse like this, you're like, oh, wait a minute. What about when I've been the one that's been guilty of this? And God's forgiven me, and God's helped me, and God's restored me. I don't want others only remembering all the mess ups that I made. I don't want when somebody, when my name comes up and I did something maybe 10 years ago that I did, be like, oh, that's Teresa, she did this, she did that, she, let her temper get a hold of her, and she just, did this or that or whatever. I don't want that to be what I'm remembered by. And I hope that all of your mistakes that you've ever made, that's not what you want people to remember. That's not what you want people to see. When we've been forgiven, and this is what this is talking about, we ourselves have been guilty of this, but we've asked for forgiveness, and God has forgiven us. Sometimes we have a tendency to want to hold on to things against ourselves that God's forgiven. I did that for a long time. There was some things that God forgave me of, and I couldn't forgive myself. And I had a really, really, really difficult battle forgiving myself. And what it was, it wasn't about forgiving myself, but it was about accepting the forgiveness that had been given to me by God himself, who I had sinned against. I had sinned against God himself. And when I realized that he wanted me to accept that forgiveness, because there was things he wanted me to do, and he knew that until I realized I had truly been forgiven, when you have been forgiven, I mean completely forgiven, they're gone. The sins are no more. That's why he wipes them away. They are no more. I don't wear a scarlet letter. I don't wear a sign that says this is all the things I've done before. I don't have to share everything I've done before. I felt like that for the longest time. Oh, don't brag on me. Don't look at me because you don't know what all I've done. When I realized, but all that's part of what he had to forgive me for, and that he did, he made me clean. He made me clean, and there's nothing I can do to make up for it. But he wants me to accept it. Then whenever others mess up and then they receive God's forgiveness, then I don't want to look at them and say, oh, but you remember what they used to do? Remember how they used to live? You wouldn't believe the stuff they've done. We don't want to I don't want to have a part of any of those conversations. I don't even want to hear those conversations, much less any of that come out of my mouth any longer. And I've been caught up in that before. And I don't want that to be a part of my life anymore. Why? Because the Lord is showing me I've been forgiven. And how better to show the love of God than to those that don't. First of all, show it to those that don't know the love of God. And then show that love of God toward those that don't deserve the love of God. Why? Because I didn't deserve the love of God. And yet he showed it to me. He offered it to me. He offered me forgiveness. And I accepted it. And he washed me whiter than snow. Oh gosh, I just had that image of just a beautiful winter back home, of just that waking up and just everything being covered in white, clean, powdered snow, and you can't see any dirt. You can't see everything's just pure and white and clean, and the air is fresh. Oh my word, the air is so fresh. And everything just feels new and brand new. And that's what God did for me, and that's what God did for you. If you're saved, that's what he did for you, and you're clean. And we want others to know that and to experience that. And when they do, we need to realize they've been made clean, and we don't need to hold it against them. We don't need to bring it up. There's some things that some things that the way Todd used to handle our finances, and he looks back now and he's like, I was so stupid, I was so dumb, I shouldn't have done that. And I told him, he kept bringing it up there for the longest time, and I'm like, Todd, I said, do you realize I don't even think about that stuff anymore? You don't need to, because he would say, honey, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I don't even think about it anymore. It's not something that you don't need to bring it up. You've been forgiven by the Lord. You've been forgiven by me. It was a difficult time in our life and in our marriage, but I kept having to pray, Lord, I can't do anything, but you can. And waiting, being patient on the Lord. And the Lord made the changes that need to be made. Now, in my life, I needed to make changes as well. There was things that I do wrong and that I did wrong. And so the Lord's always molding and shaping and making us into what he wants us to be. And we need to understand that he's patient with us. Therefore, we know he's patient with others, and that he's going to help them. And that as he does, and as they are forgiven and restoration takes place and we watch this transformation, we don't need to hold those things against them. First of all, we don't have the right to judge. And second of all, that's how we show the love of God to those that don't deserve the love of God. because we've been shown the love of God when we didn't deserve the love of God. And I am so thankful and so grateful. The message that the pastor just preached yesterday was very convicting. The Lord was dealing with me about some things. Now, I was serving. But where I had been lacking in my life was the sitting. Not sitting doing nothing, but sitting and spending time with the Lord. I have a tendency to be a Martha and work. But the Lord wants us to have a balance. Now, He wants us to work, but there's got to be a balance where we're like Mary and we're sitting and we're soaking it all in and we're taking it all in and we're cherishing just being in a relationship with Him and we're cherishing what He has to say and we're trying to learn and we're soaking up His wisdom and we're soaking up His word and we're just spending time with Him when we're thanking Him and we're praising Him. And I was rushing through those times. I wasn't just enjoying, I was looking at my watch. I was thinking about how long this is taking and feeling rushed. Lord, I've got so much to get done today. And so I wasn't balanced. And the Lord convicted me of that yesterday morning. And He forgave me. And then I'm reading this in verse number 3 and realizing that I've been forgiven and I continue to be forgiven. He continues to show me the love of God. How? Even through correction. Sometimes through correction, it's the most precious times that we are shown the love of God by God Himself, is when He is correcting us. Why? Because we realize He doesn't want any of that. He doesn't want any of that conflict going on, messing up our relationship. That He wants that, not that quick 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever time with us. He wants that when we just don't have, we don't have an agenda that we've got to get to until we've spent some time with the Lord, that we are putting Him first, that we are cherishing our relationship. And what He's showing us when He's correcting us is that He cherishes our relationship on His side. And that to the point where He's going to deal with us, He's going to correct us so that that action can be changed, so that I can say, okay, Lord, I'm so sorry, which I already did this morning. I wrote Him a love letter. Lord, I am so sorry. And some of the times that I have felt His love the most is in those moments that He has used the preaching of God's word or the reading of His word through scripture, and I've seen His correction, and that He has shown me His love through those corrective measures of wanting to stop being the busy and stop and spend time with Him, because that's just how much He cherishes my relationship with Him. And that's been precious. And when we want to make sure that our relationships with others stay precious, then we want to deal with things. And sometimes it's not something that they've done, but it's something going on inside of us. And that's what a lot of this is dealing with. When you think about this verse number 3, foolish, that's things I've done. Disobedient, that's things I've done. Serving divers, deceived, I've been deceived. I've thought something incorrectly, whatever the case may be. Serving divers, lust, that's inside of me. That's my flesh. Pleasures, that's my flesh. Malice, that's my anger. That's my envy. That's my strife. That's going on inside of me. It's dealing with stuff that I've done. And it hinders my relationships with others, not because they've done something wrong, but because I'm handling it wrong. I'm dealing with things wrong. I am in a moment where I need to be corrected so that it can correct, and I can turn around and experience that love of God again, and then share that love of God again. And so that's what I'm getting out of this Titus verses 1 through 5, that we are to, as we experience that love of God, that we are to show that love of God. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you again soon.